The Galactic Culinary Summit took place in what Earth referred to as the World Gastronomy Dome, a massive structure constructed with transparent panels that shimmered like precious stones beneath the light of distant stars. Delegates from all parts of the cosmos roamed the event, some captivated by the Earth's culinary delights, others showing clear skepticism. Jimmy Carson stood at his post, meticulously cleaning his smoker with the precision of an artisan caring for a treasured tool. Around him, tables were laden with ingredients, kitchen tools, and bottles of sauces ranging from sweet to intensely fiery. A robust man with a sun-drenched complexion and a mischievous glint in his eyes, Jimmy had been selected to represent Earth for a reason. His grilled ribs were famous in several regions, and if the event went well, they might even gain recognition across the stars. Nearby, Mazik from the central delegation studied the human intently with a haunting stillness. Maziks were sleek, insect-like beings whose bodies glimmered like oil on water. They valued efficiency, and Mazik was no exception. Its 3 glowing eyes shifted to track Jimmy's every motion. Finally, Mazik spoke, its voice translated into clear, precise English. "I must ask, what is the purpose of sauce?" Jimmy paused, his hand hovering over a bottle of molasses, squinting at the alien in confusion. Maziks weren't known for their sense of humor, but one could never be sure. "The purpose of sauce?" he repeated. "Yes," Mazik responded, antenna twitching. "Sauce appears to serve no purpose. It adds no nutritional value and masks the natural qualities of the protein beneath. It is unnecessary." Jimmy chuckled and leaned against his smoker. "Well, Mazik, sauce is about more than just the food. It's about the experience." Mazik tilted its head, its motion precise and unsettling. "Experience?" it inquired. "I do not understand." Jimmy stroked his beard, intrigued by the challenge. "Why don't I show you? I'll cook my barbecue ribs, and by the time you try them, you'll understand exactly what sauce is for." Mazik hesitated. "Barbecue ribs? You mean the charred remnants of an organic creature?" Jimmy winced slightly. "Well, I wouldn't put it exactly like that, but yes, pork ribs, seasoned with spices, slow-cooked, and topped off with a generous layer of sauce." Mazik's antenna stood rigid. "This process requires time?" Jimmy grinned. 6 hours. 6 hours? Mazik's mandibles clicked sharply. "That is an extraordinary waste of resources. The Central Alliance can prepare food in under 3 minutes." Jimmy, tapping the smoker's lid with a gleam in his eye, replied, "Barbecue isn't about speed, it's about taking the time to do it right. Stick around, and you might learn something." Mazik stood still for a long moment, its iridescent skin shifting in color, before it spoke with reluctant curiosity, "I shall observe." Jimmy laughed heartily. "Good choice. Let's get started." As Jimmy began his preparations, other delegates wandered over, drawn by his friendly demeanor and the promise of a live demonstration. There was Gulo, a furry quadruped from the planet Midik, who sniffed the air with hopeful curiosity, and Law, a crystalline being whose voice chimed melodically. Even they seemed intrigued by Jimmy's offer. Jimmy pulled out a slab of ribs, already trimmed and ready for cooking. He sprinkled a blend of paprika, brown sugar, salt, pepper, and garlic powder over the meat, massaging it in with practiced hands. Mazik observed closely, using its wrist-mounted analyzer. "This mixture contains 16 different compounds," Mazik noted. "What is their purpose?" "Flavor," Jimmy answered with a smile. "It's all about layering. The rub gets things started, and the sauce finishes the job." Mazik's skin flickered with a doubtful green hue. "This process seems illogical." "Illogical or not, it works," Jimmy shrugged, unfazed. "Now, let's fire up the smoker." He carefully loaded the ribs into the smoker and adjusted the vents to maintain a steady 225 degrees Fahrenheit. "This baby does the work," he said proudly, patting the smoker. "But we're just getting started. While the ribs cook, let's make some sauce." Mazik stiffened. "Another component? Why is this necessary?" "You'll see," Jimmy replied, gathering his ingredients. "Trust the process." As the smoker gently hummed, releasing fragrant curls of hickory smoke, Jimmy tapped the thermometer embedded in the smoker's lid to ensure the temperature remained stable. "This next part is where the real magic happens," Jimmy said, turning to Mazik. The alien's eyes followed every movement. "Magic?" Mazik asked. "Are you suggesting this process involves phenomena beyond empirical understanding?" Jimmy chuckled as he unscrewed a bottle of apple cider vinegar. "Not magic like you're thinking. More like the kind of magic you feel when everything comes together just right. Let me show you. Mazik tilted its head, its iridescence deepening as it observed. Proceed. Jimmy quickly poured ketchup into a saucepan, added a splash of vinegar, a dollop of molasses, and a squirt of mustard. He added brown sugar to the mixture and caught Mazik's surprised stare. Too much sugar? Jimmy asked. It is an overwhelming quantity, Mazik said, scanning the mixture. This level of sweetness is indulgent. That's kind of the point, Jimmy grinned, adding cayenne pepper and paprika. Life's tough. Sometimes a little indulgence isn't a bad thing. Mazik's skin flickered again, this time with hues of blue and yellow. Humans have a peculiar tendency to create complexity where simplicity would suffice. Complexity is what makes things interesting, Jimmy said, stirring the sauce over the portable burner. You'll see. As the sauce simmered, its aroma mixed with the smoky fragrance from the ribs, attracting more alien delegates to Jimmy's station. Gulo, the furry quadruped, padded closer, sniffing the air with approval. What is that smell? Gulo asked, its voice low and thick. Homemade barbecue sauce, Jimmy replied, lifting a spoonful of the glossy mixture to show off. Want to try? Gulo's golden eyes widened as it extended a paw-like hand. Jimmy ladled a small amount into a dish and handed it over. Gulo dipped a claw into the sauce and tasted it, its ears perking up. This is extraordinary, Gulo exclaimed, licking its claws. Sweet, yet there's heat and depth I can't describe. That's the layers talking, Jimmy said, clearly pleased. He turned to Mazik, who had remained motionless. Care to try? Mazik hesitated, then extended a long appendage toward the dish. It hovered over the sauce before retracting. I am uncertain. The central digestive system is particular. Jimmy shrugged. Suit yourself, but if you're here to learn about humans, you're missing out. Mazik's mandibles clicked in contemplation. I shall wait for the finished product. Fair enough, Jimmy said, tipping the saucepan to drizzle some sauce onto a fresh spoon. But it'll be worth it, trust me. As the sauce continued to simmer, Jimmy turned his attention back to the smoker. He opened the lid, releasing a cloud of rich, smoky aroma. The ribs were taking on a deep, mahogany color, the rub caramelizing into a flavorful crust. Now, that's what I call progress, Jimmy said, waving away the smoke. Mazik leaned in. The outer layer has altered its composition? That's called bark, Jimmy explained. It happens when heat, smoke, and seasoning come together. It gives the meat that texture and flavor you just can't fake. And it takes hours. Such inefficiency defies reason, Mazik muttered. Maybe it does, but some things are worth taking the time for, Jimmy replied with a smirk. Mazik remained silent as the crowd of alien delegates murmured with growing anticipation. Even Law, the crystalline being, chimed in with a soft resonance. Human methods are fascinating. Such artistry in sustenance is rare. Jimmy flipped the ribs carefully, spritzing them with a mix of apple juice and water to keep them moist. It's all about balance, he said. You can't rush barbecue, and you can't skimp on the care you put into it. The sauce, the rub, the smoke, they all work together to make something special. Mazik observed in silence. Balance, it said, an unfamiliar concept to the Central Alliance. Stick around long enough, and you might get the hang of it, Jimmy replied, closing the smoker with a satisfied nod. The ribs continued to cook, the hours passing in a rhythm of spritzing, turning, and checking the temperature. The crowd around Jimmy grew larger as word spread about the mysterious human delicacy being prepared. Delegates from planets Jimmy had never heard of lined up to ask questions, some even trying to sneak tastes of the sauce. By the fifth hour, the aroma was intoxicating, even for species that didn't have traditional olfactory systems. Mazik's skin had shifted to a faint gold, a sign Jimmy had learned to recognize as curiosity. When will the demonstration be complete? Mazik asked, its tone less dismissive than before. Jimmy grinned and lifted the smoker's lid to reveal the ribs, their caramelized bark gleaming. Right now, all that's left is the sauce. With deliberate precision, he brushed a generous layer of glossy barbecue sauce over the ribs, watching it meld with the bark. The sauce sizzled as it hit the hot surface, releasing a sweet, smoky vapor that made the crowd stir with excitement. Now, Jimmy said, pulling the ribs off the smoker and setting them on a cutting board. The real fun begins. Mazik leaned in, its eyes wide. I must witness this firsthand. Jimmy grabbed a knife and began slicing the rack into individual ribs. Get ready to taste something you won't forget. The knife slid through the ribs like butter, each piece separating with a satisfying hiss as the sauce caramelized at the edges. The crowd around the station grew silent, a hush that demanded attention. Even Mazik, who had maintained a skeptical demeanor, leaned closer. "All right," Jimmy said, stacking the ribs neatly on a platter. "This is the moment of truth." Mazik's mandibles clicked faintly. "Truth?" it asked. "You imply this food holds philosophical significance?" Jimmy chuckled as he placed the platter on the counter. "Not philosophical, exactly. More like personal. Trust me, Mazik, you're going to understand something about humans that you didn't before." Mazik hesitated, its translucent limbs flexing in a ripple of indecision. The surrounding delegates, Gulo, Law, and even a leathery reptilian named Froer, watched intently. The anticipation in the air was palpable. "Go on," Jimmy encouraged, nudging the platter toward Mazik. "Don't be shy. Pick one up and give it a try." Mazik's appendage extended toward the platter, selecting a rib with meticulous care, as though handling a delicate artifact. It paused to inspect the caramelized bark and glossy sauce with reverent curiosity. Finally, it brought the rib to its mouth. The first bite was tentative, a small nibble that barely disturbed the bark. The effect was immediate. Mazik's body froze. Its shimmering skin pulsed with waves of vibrant orange, green, and violet. Its antennae quivered violently, and its eyes widened in what could only be described as shock. For a moment, Jimmy wondered if he'd made a mistake. Was the sauce too spicy? Did Mazik's have a strange reaction to hickory smoke? But then Mazik emitted a deep, resonant hum that grew louder, filling the entire space. "This," Mazik's voice warbled, as though recalibrating its translator, "this is an extraordinary revelation." The crowd erupted into murmurs. Gulo, the furry quadruped, padded forward, sniffing at the platter. "What does it taste like? Describe it." Mazik raised a trembling limb, holding the half-eaten rib. "It is tangy, sweet, yet there is heat, a burn that enhances the overall sensation. The texture is complex, tender yet resistant in just the right measure. And the sauce ties it all together into an experience that transcends the individual components. It is harmonious." Jimmy grinned, crossing his arms. "Told ya." Mazik didn't respond, too busy devouring the rest of the rib with surprising enthusiasm. By the time Mazik finished, its shimmering body glowed in hues of celebration. "I must taste another," Mazik declared, reaching for a second rib. Gulo couldn't hold back any longer. "May I?" it asked eagerly. "Help yourself," Jimmy said, gesturing to the platter. "Plenty to go around." Gulo grabbed a rib with both paws and bit into it eagerly. Its golden eyes widened, and it let out a deep, satisfied purr. "This is remarkable. The combination of flavors is unlike anything I've encountered." Law, the crystalline being, carefully picked up a rib with its delicate appendages. Although it had no visible mouth, its body resonated with harmonic chimes as it consumed the meat. "This creation defies logical classification," Law said. "It is a symphony of contrasts." Even Froer, the stoic reptilian delegate, stepped forward. It picked up a rib, examined it closely, and took a deliberate bite. Its scaly face softened ever so slightly, and it let out a low, satisfied hiss. "Primitive, yet effective." Jimmy laughed, wiping his hands on his apron. "Barbecue's got a way of bringing folks together, even from way out there." He pointed skyward for emphasis. Mazik set down its second rib, its limbs trembling faintly. "Human," it said, "explain." Jimmy was genuinely curious. "What do you mean?" "This process," Mazik gestured toward the smoker, the sauce, and the platter of ribs. "You take raw materials and transform them into something entirely new. Something that offers no direct survival benefit but instead provides enjoyment. It is an act of creation." "Why?" Mazik asked. Jimmy shrugged. "Why not? Life's hard enough without a little joy in it. We do this because it makes us happy, because it makes other people happy. And that's worth all the time and effort." Mazik's iridescent body dimmed slightly as it processed the statement. "Happiness," it said softly. "A concept elusive to the Central Alliance. We prioritize efficiency, utility, and logic. Yet this dish provokes sensations we do not have terminology for. That's the power of food," Jimmy said. "It's more than just fuel. It's a way of connecting with people, with ideas, even with yourself. The crowd nodded in agreement, their voices rising in praise for the barbecue ribs. Mazik remained silent, its glowing eyes fixed on the platter. Finally, it reached for one last rib. I will require documentation of this process, Mazik said. The Central Consortium must analyze and replicate this phenomenon. Jimmy grinned. You can analyze it all you want, Mazik, but if you really want to get it, you're going to have to come back and fire up a smoker yourself. Mazik hesitated, its shimmering body glowing faintly gold. Perhaps I shall. The crowd around Jimmy's station had swelled into a lively gathering of alien delegates from across the stars. Each species was animated in its own way, chattering, humming, or flashing bioluminescent patterns as they discussed the revelation of Earth's barbecue. Jimmy leaned back against the counter, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold. He had been nervous at first, unsure if Earth's simple barbecue could stand up to galactic scrutiny. But now, seeing the awe on faces that didn't even have mouths, he knew he had done something special. Mazik remained near the smoker, its shimmering body cycling through colors that indicated deep thought. It hadn't spoken since declaring it would document the process but hadn't left either. Its fingers tapped rhythmically on the edge of the counter, a curious new behavior Jimmy suspected had been borrowed from humans. Breaking the silence, Jimmy asked, "So, what's the verdict? Still think sauce is pointless?" Mazik's eyes swiveled toward him, glowing faintly. Pointless is an inaccurate descriptor. Sauce, as you call it, is an enhancer. It transforms an already improbable process into something remarkable. I cannot deny its effectiveness. Jimmy smirked. That's about as close to a compliment as I'll get from you, huh? Mazik's body shimmered with a soft orange hue. It is difficult to process the human proclivity for creation without purpose, and yet I find myself intrigued. Your species expends resources not for necessity, but for experience. It is illogical. Maybe, Jimmy admitted with a shrug, but sometimes the best things in life don't have to make sense. Before Mazik could respond, a familiar furry figure padded up to them. Jimmy, there's a problem, Gulo said, wide-eyed with excitement. Jimmy raised an eyebrow. Problem? What kind of problem? The KR delegation, Gulo explained. They've tasted the ribs and declared them dangerous. They want to speak with you. Jimmy sighed, setting down the tongs he'd been holding. Figures. Lead the way. Mazik followed behind as Jimmy trailed Gulo to a nearby table where the Krell delegates, towering, beetle-like creatures with segmented shells and shimmering wings, were gathered. One of them stood taller than the rest, its mandibles clicking sharply. You the one making the fuss? Jimmy asked, planting his hands on his hips. The Krell leader turned its compound eyes toward him, clicking its mandibles rapidly. Its translator buzzed before emitting a grating, throaty voice. Human, your food has destabilized our collective. We must address this disruption. Jimmy frowned. Destabilized? How? The taste, the Krell said, gesturing with its clawed limbs. It triggered unexpected neural responses, a cascade of stimulation that led to temporary dysfunction. Wait, Jimmy said, holding up his hand. Are you saying you liked it so much it broke your brain? The Krell hesitated, its wings fluttering. The experience was overwhelming. Such sensations do not exist in our food. It is unsettling. Jimmy couldn't help but laugh. Well, I didn't mean to throw y'all for a loop, but hey, food's supposed to make you feel something. Maybe you just need to ease into it. The Krell leader clicked its mandibles thoughtfully. We may require further exposure, controlled experiments, perhaps. Sure, Jimmy said with a grin. You're all welcome to swing by Earth anytime. I'll set you up with a full barbecue spread. The Krell seemed to consider this before nodding its massive head. We shall consider this proposal. As the Krell delegates withdrew, Mazik stepped closer, its body glowing faintly violet. Even your food provokes conflict. Humans are singular in their ability to disrupt and inspire simultaneously. Jimmy laughed and clapped Mazik lightly on the back. That's just how we roll. Sometimes you've got to shake things up to make something great. The summit began to wind down, and the delegates slowly began to disperse, many carrying bottles of sauce or scribbled notes about barbecue techniques. Mazik lingered by Jimmy's station, its iridescent body pulsing softly. I must return to the Central Consortium, Mazik said, its tone subdued. But I will not forget this experience. Jimmy nodded and extended a hand. You're welcome back anytime. Next time, maybe I'll show you how to make brisket. Mazik regarded the hand for a moment before extending a spindly limb to clasp it. Your methods are illogical, it said, its voice faintly tinged with what Jimmy swore was amusement. But I believe there is value in them. As Mazik departed, carrying a small bottle of Jimmy's homemade sauce tucked under one limb, Jimmy turned back to the smoker and chuckled to himself. Didn't think I'd spend today teaching aliens about barbecue, he muttered. But I'll take it. Above, the stars glittered, and for the first time in galactic history, the smoky, tangy legacy of Earth's sauce was making its way across the universe.